In this video, we will show you how to construct sus4 and sus2 chords and then use them in chord progressions. You just heard the C sus4 chord. Sus4 chords are written in notation with lowercase sus, then a number 4. The sus4 chord is one of two suspended chords. The other is called sus2. You just heard the C sus2 chord. Sus2 chords are written in notation with lowercase sus and then the number 2. How do we construct the suspended chords? Chords are created by using notes from a scale. Major chords are created with 3 notes from the major scale: 1st, 3rd, and 5th. Minor chords are created by using the notes 1st, flat or minor 3rd, and 5th. So the thing that gives these notes their quality is the 3rd and flat 3rd note. A change of just a semitone or half a step changes the quality of these chords. If we remove this 3rd note, then we strip the chord of its quality. It is neither major nor minor. It is suspended and wants to resolve to the major or minor to feel settled or grounded. If we add the 4th note in the major scale to the 1st and 5th, then we create a sus4 chord. If we add the 2nd note in the major scale to the 1st and 5th, then we create a sus2 chord. Let's clarify this with an example. The C major scale has the following notes: C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. To create a C major chord, we take the 1st, 3rd, and 5th, which gives us C, E, and G. If we drop the 3rd by a semitone, we create a C minor chord with the notes C, E flat, and G. To construct a C sus4 chord, we take out the 3rd note and replace it with the 4th note, which gives us C, F, and G. And to create a C sus2 chord, we add the 2nd note to the 1st and 5th, which looks like C, D, and G. Let's have a listen to C major, C minor, C sus4, and C sus2 played after one another to appreciate the difference. Suspended chords are generally emotive, ambiguous, and intense. Sus4 is the more commonly used of the two chords. It is more focused and tense than sus2 and has an ability to create a sense of conflict. Sus2 has a less tense, almost empty quality. It could also be considered as mysterious. How can we use the suspended chords? Sus chords are widely used in popular music because they are very versatile. All 6 major and minor chords in a key can be turned into sus chords. This applies to major and minor keys. If we are keeping strictly to the key and not using any notes out of the key, then in a major key we should avoid 3 sus2 and 4 sus4. In a minor key this would be 5 sus2 and 6 sus4. You will, however, come across these chords being used, and there are no right and wrong rules with songwriting. So the best advice, as always, is to experiment with these chords and trust your ear as to what sounds good or bad to you. Let's begin with the sus4 chord. The simplest use of the sus4 is whilst we are playing a single chord. You can alternate between the standard version of the chord and the sus4. This can add interest and momentum and stop the single chord becoming boring. This is often used to spice up the one chord. Please note that we will use the key of C major for our major key examples. If you want to transform your songwriting, then use the ultimate musical sketchpad, HookPad. We use HookPad to show you chord progressions and melodies in our videos because it is easy to use and intuitive. Click the link in the description below and see what HookPad can do for your music. A turnaround is typically a 2 or 4 bar sequence of chords that repeats. It helps to create a repetitive hook in a song which makes it more memorable. The 5 chord is used in turnarounds to bring us back to the 1 chord. If we use a sus4 chord as a 5 chord, then we strengthen and reinforce this feeling of returning home to 1. For example, if we take the previous turnaround but change the 1 chord to sus4, then we create an interesting sound. The suspended 1 chord prevents resolution and gives the turnaround an unsettled feeling. We can use this desire to resolve to create a song intro. Staying on 5 sus4 adds tension and expectancy for chord 1. Once we go into the verse, notice how a single beat on the 4 sus4 creates an interesting sound, breaking up the chord. Guitar players will often use these fleeting moves to the sus4 because they only involve moving one finger in certain chord shapes, and they spice up a song section. Sus4 chords are also useful in minor keys. Because of their suspended nature, they can resolve to major and minor chords. We can exploit this in minor keys where we will often use the major and minor versions of a chord in the same song. If you want some minor key help, there is a link in the description below. Let's look at an example in the key of A minor. Pay particular attention to bars 3 and 7. In our previous examples, we have always resolved the sus4 to its major or minor root chord before moving on. But you can, of course, just use the sus4 and carry on with your progression. This can add further tension or frustration. For example, a sus4 chord can be better integrated in a progression if the chord before it has a common tone, especially the suspended note itself. This can sometimes require the use of different chord types. In this example, in the key of C major, we will use the minor 7th chord as chord 2. This uses a C note, which is the 4th note in the following 5 sus4 chord. Also note how we move to the 6th chord after 5 rather than 1 to create an element of surprise and movement. In a major key, the 5 chord is often turned into a dominant 7th chord. This is a major chord with a flat 7th note from the major scale. Watch to the end of this video for more help with the dominant 7th chords. Chord 5 can also be a dominant 7th and a sus4 at the same time. This is a chord with the notes 1, 4, 5, flat 7. This can open up more common tones to use as we did in the previous example. Here we look at a couple of examples. Note how the 5, 7th sus4 chord resolves to the dominant 7th chord rather than the standard 5 chord. The 5-to-1 chord change which we have looked at is often called the perfect cadence. It creates the feeling of returning home. If we combine all the techniques we have discussed so far, it leads us to the most powerful, intense version of this perfect cadence. The 2 minor 7th shares 2 notes in common with the 5 dominant 7th sus4. This then resolves to the 5 dominant 7th and takes us back around to the 1 chord. Let's now turn to the sus2 chord. sus2 can add colour and mystery to a sequence. You can experiment with this in your existing progressions. Start with sections that stay on a single chord and alternate between the root chord and sus2. sus2 can also add movement, even when we only use a few chords. Here is an example in the key of C major. In a minor key sequence, the sus2 can dilute the minor effect, or serve to withhold the minor chord 1. Compare bars 1 to 4 with 5 to 8 in this progression in the key of A minor. We can, of course, use sus4 and sus2 in the same song. This is often used in indie or jangle rock songs, where sus chords are rapidly linked together with the standard root chord. As we mentioned earlier, certain chord shapes make these moves very easy on guitar. Here is an example of this in action. The dominant 7th chord has an important role as the 5 chord. It helps to provide a strong draw back to the 1 chord. As we saw in this video, it can also help us to construct a dominant 7th sus4 chord to use in the perfect cadence. Click the video on screen now to further understand these interesting and useful chords.